The most dangerous person in any negotiation, any relationship, any room is not the smartest person or the most prepared person. It is the person who is genuinely willing to walk away, not as a tactic, not as a bluff, but as a real internal truth. And here is what makes this so powerful: that person rarely has to actually walk away. Because the moment you stop needing something, the entire dynamic around that thing changes. Most people spend their lives trying to learn better ways to convince, persuade, and hold on to things, relationships, jobs, opportunities. But today, we are going to talk about the opposite skill: how to kill your need for approval and outcomes entirely, and why that makes you almost untouchable. By the end of this video, you will understand a shift in mindset that sounds simple but very few people actually live by it. And once you understand it, you will see why some people seem to get everything they want almost effortlessly, while others who try twice as hard get less. If this idea of becoming outcome-independent interests, you make sure you subscribe right now, because this is one of those concepts that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's start by talking about two very different ways of approaching any interaction, whether it is a negotiation, a relationship conversation, or even a job discussion. The first approach is what we will call the scarcity mindset. When you operate from scarcity, you believe deep down that this specific outcome is the only option, or at least the best option available to you. Maybe it is a job you feel like you cannot lose. Maybe it is a relationship you feel like you cannot survive without. Maybe it is a deal you feel like you have to close. When you operate from this mindset, something happens beneath the surface. You start needing the other person's approval more than you need your own clarity. Every word you say, every offer you make, every response you give becomes filtered through the question: will this make them say yes? Will this make them stay? Will this keep things from falling apart? And here is the problem: the other person can feel this even if they cannot name it. Desperation has a frequency, and people pick up on it, whether consciously or not. When someone senses that you need something from them more than they need to give it, the entire balance of power shifts, even if nothing has been said directly. The second approach is what we will call the abundance mindset, and this does not mean pretending you do not care about the outcome. It means genuinely believing, and this is the key word, genuinely, that if this specific outcome does not happen, something else will be okay too. Maybe not identical, maybe not even as good in the short term, but okay. When you operate from abundance, your words and offers are not filtered through need, they come from clarity. You say what is true, you offer what is fair, and then you simply observe what happens next. This does not mean you do not want a good outcome. Of course you do. It means your sense of safety is not entirely dependent on getting it. Here is the practical tool that makes this shift actually usable. Instead of just a nice idea, we will call it the walk-away price. Before any important conversation, whether it is a salary negotiation, a difficult conversation with a partner, or even a discussion with a friend about a recurring issue, decide in advance what your actual limit is. What is the point at which you would genuinely be willing to walk away, not as a threat, not as something you say out loud necessarily, but as something you have already decided internally before the conversation even begins. Here is why this matters so much. Most people enter important conversations without having decided this in advance, which means they are figuring out their limits in real time, while emotions are running high, while the other person is talking, while pressure is building. And when you are deciding your limits in the moment under pressure, you become what we can call hyper reactive. Every word the other person says starts to feel like it might change your entire decision. You might agree to things you would not have agreed to in a calmer moment, or you might react too strongly to something that was not actually that significant. But when you have already decided your walk-away price before the conversation starts, something remarkable happens. You stop negotiating with yourself in real time. The conversation becomes less about figuring out what you can tolerate and more about simply observing whether this specific situation meets a standard you already set for yourself in advance. This alone removes an enormous amount of emotional volatility from difficult conversations. Now here is the part that sounds like a paradox, but is actually based on real psychological mechanics. By being willing to lose something, you often become more likely to keep it. And this is not magical thinking. This is about how your behavior changes when you have already made peace with a potential loss. Think about someone negotiating a raise. The version of this person, operating from scarcity, walks into that conversation needing the yes their tone. Might be slightly apologetic, they might soften their request multiple times, they might accept the first pushback without much resistance, because deep down losing this job feels unacceptable to them. The version of this same person operating from abundance has already done the internal work before the conversation. They have decided, if this conversation does not go well, I am willing to start looking elsewhere, and I have made peace with that possibility. Notice this person is not necessarily more aggressive. They might use almost identical words to ask for the same raise, but their tone carries a different quality. There is no apology underneath the request. There is no subtle plea in their voice, and here is what often happens: the person on the other side of that conversation, even if they cannot articulate why, responds differently to a request that does not carry desperation underneath. It sometimes this results in a better outcome, not because of any clever tactic, but simply because the absence of desperation changes how the request is received. This is the actionable reversal at the heart of this entire video. Your attachment to an outcome does not increase your chances of getting it. In fact, in many social and professional contexts, your attachment decreases your chances, because that attachment often translates into behavior that signals low value, low confidence, or low alternatives, even if none of that is actually true about your situation. So how do you actually build this outcome independence? Because right now it might feel like something only people in privileged circumstances with lots of options can genuinely feel. The first step is separating your identity from any single outcome. This is internal work that happens before any conversation. If your sense of self-worth is entirely tied to whether this person says yes, whether this relationship continues, whether this specific job approves of you, then walking away genuinely feels like losing a piece of yourself. But if your sense of self exists independently of any single external outcome, then a no becomes information rather than an identity crisis. This does not happen overnight, but it begins with simply asking yourself, who am I if this does not work out, and sitting with that question honestly. The second step is building what we can call alternative pathways in advance. This does not mean you need to have another job offer in hand or another relationship waiting in the wings. It means doing the mental and sometimes practical work of acknowledging that other paths exist even if they are not fully developed. Yet when you know in the back of your mind that this is not your only option, even if that other option is less convenient or less developed, your nervous system relaxes slightly, and that relaxation changes how you show up. The third step is practicing small walkaways in low-stakes situations. Before applying this to major life decisions, practice this principle in smaller everyday interactions. If a conversation with someone becomes draining, practice the discomfort of simply ending it earlier than you normally would. If a deal or request does not feel right, practice saying no, even when saying yes would be easier. These small repetitions build the internal muscle of tolerating discomfort without immediately needing to resolve it through appeasement. The fourth step is noticing the physical sensation of attachment when you feel that tight, nervous, urgent feeling in your body. During a conversation, that feeling is often attachment to a specific outcome. Simply noticing this feeling without immediately acting from it creates a small but important gap between the urge to convince and the actual words that come out of your mouth. Here is what I want you to really understand about all of this. Becoming outcome independent does not mean becoming indifferent to your life. It does not mean pretending you do not care about your job, your relationships, or your goals. It means recognizing that your worth and your stability do not depend on any single one of these things working out exactly the way you hoped. And ironically, this is precisely what allows you to show up in a way that often leads to better outcomes, not because you are using clever trick, but because the absence of desperation changes the entire texture of how you are perceived. The next time you find yourself in an important conversation, whether it is asking for something, negotiating something, or simply expressing how you feel about something, take a moment before it begins and ask yourself, what is my walk-away price here? And am I actually willing to honor it? And once you can answer that question honestly, you walk into that room as a fundamentally different person. If this video gave you a new way to think about negotiation and self-worth, make sure you subscribe. Because next time, we are going deeper into how to read the difference between someone who values you and someone who simply does not want to lose convenient access to you.